community post that I'm starting a new recap series on this channel, covering almost every major anime the same way I've done with One Piece, and this is the first one. Some of you also commented asking for Naruto, Bleach, Black Clover, and a few others that weren't even in the poll. I've seen those comments. So here's the plan. Most likely the next series will be Naruto or Bleach. After that, I'll continue JJK till the end before Season 3 finishes. Wish me luck, because that's a lot of work. Also, for the people saying, don't leave One Piece, I'm not leaving it. I'm already working on a new One Piece recap updated from scratch, so no, One Piece isn't going anywhere. With that said, now let's watch the complete One Piece live-action recap. We find ourselves in a world completely unlike our own. A place overflowing with ancient mysteries and perilous threats lurking in every corner of the ocean. In these vast seas, there are those who choose to live by their own set of laws. Legendary figures known as pirates, who spend their lives in a tireless pursuit of grand adventures. They hunt for unimaginable riches. Exactly 22 years ago in the city of Loge Town, a massive crowd gathered pirates. He had been sentenced to death for his many crimes of piracy, but before his end, he had already amassed a legendary and colossal treasure. Just before he was executed, he announced to the world that if anyone desired wealth, fame, and absolute power, his treasure contained everything this world had to offer. He declared it would belong to whoever could find it first. Immediately following this proclamation, he was executed, leaving the entire crowd heading for the open seas in search of that hidden fortune, marking the beginning of the great pirate era. Now, everyone's sole ambition was to locate Monkey D. Luffy. He's a young lad who surprisingly can't swim a stroke, yet he's completely determined to find the One Piece and claim the title of King of the Pirates. However, he realized he'd need a proper crew to pull it off, even if he started by pitching the idea to a passing newsbird, asking if it wanted to join his crew. Obviously, the bird wasn't interested, and soon his little boat sank, forcing him to hide inside a wooden barrel. He eventually drifted 5 million berries. She was in the middle of brutally looting a smaller vessel when Luffy's barrel happened to roll right onto the deck of that very ship. While her crew was busy pillaging, Alvida herself was actually on the hunt for the notorious and feared pirate hunter, Zoro. She had heard rumors that he was recently aboard that ship, but one of the crew members informed her that he had actually headed toward a nearby island. Apparently, Zoro had a specific list of pirates he was hunting down, but the crewman pointed out that Alvida wasn't even on it. Furious at the insult, Alvida eliminated the poor guy on the spot. Afterwards, she ordered a timid boy named Coby. It was this same Coby who eventually stumbled upon Luffy as he emerged from a barrel in the pantry. Luffy quickly told Coby to keep quiet, assuring him that he meant no harm. Luffy was simply starving and looking for a snack. Coby warned him that Captain Alvida never allowed anyone to eat before she did, as she was the absolute ruler of the ship. When Luffy mentioned that he was also a pirate, Coby found it hard to believe, as Luffy didn't fit his mental image of a pirate at all. To Coby, all pirates were disgusting individuals that he truly loathed. But Luffy insisted he was a different breed, sharing a story from when he was just a 10-year really great guy despite. Luffy then grabbed Coby, and together they made their grand exit from that vessel. The scene shifts to the legendary pirate hunter, Roronoa Zoro, who was seen lighting 2 candles in memory of people from his past. It turns out an assassin named Mr. 7 had been tailing him for 3 days. The assassin finally approached Zoro, claiming to represent a mysterious organization known as Baroque Works. Baroque Works wanted to recruit Zoro for his unique combat skills, offering him a position as one of their top killers. However, Zoro had absolutely no interest in joining any group, and he certainly didn't want a tattoo on his face. Mr. 7, the assassin, tried to force the issue with a fight, but he stood no chance against a master swordsman like Zoro. With incredible skill, Zoro ended the confrontation instantly by cutting him down. Meanwhile, Luffy was busy explaining to Coby exactly how he obtained his stretchy rubber powers and the story behind them. He recalled how, after Shanks helped him with his scar, he was still frustrated about not being taken seriously as a pirate. While rummaging, consumed the gum fruit, a devil fruit. That fruit permanently turned his body into rubber, giving him the ability to stretch at will. Now his focus was on finding a crew and reaching the Grand Line. Coby, on the other hand, shared his own secret ambition. He wanted to join the Marines, even though it seemed like a far-fetched dream given his current situation. Luffy encouraged Coby to pursue his dreams no matter how crazy they seemed. Luffy also knew he needed to find a Marine base to locate a map of the Grand Line. But, for the moment, he decided to just take a nap, because why worry about the future when you can catch some sleep right now? Meanwhile, in another corner of the East Blue, we are introduced to Nami. She's a clever young woman who pulled the classic helpless girl act to trick 2 foolish pirates and steal their boat right out from under them. Her path was leading her towards Shell's Town. Luffy and Coby eventually arrived at Shell's Town themselves. Before making any moves against the Marines, they decided to grab a meal at the local bar. Zoro and Nami were already there, and the daughter of the bar owner had prepared some special treats for Zoro. However, as she was serving the stolen Marine uniform, Luffy eventually popped up in the courtyard and was delighted to finally find Zoro tied up. He then invited Zoro to join his crew, introducing himself as Monkey D. Luffy, the future Pirate King. Zoro thought Luffy was way too optimistic, especially since Zoro considered himself a pirate hunter, not a pirate. Zoro explained that he had once made a solemn promise to someone that he would become the greatest swordsman in the world. Luffy thought that dream was incredible and even offered to untie him, telling him that if he changed, he continued his search for the map room where Nami and axe arm. Meanwhile, Helmeppo was in his room acting like a complete weirdo, posing half naked in front of a mirror with Zoro's confiscated katanas. Zoro, while putting Helmeppo out of his misery, would be a favor to the world. Nami, using her quick wits, put on her Marine act again. She smooth-talked Captain Morgan, convincing him that she was a newly transferred officer who was currently transporting a prisoner. Once Morgan left, Nami even managed to swipe his keys, which Luffy thought was absolutely brilliant. He invited her to join his pirate crew again, but Nami made it very clear that she utterly despised pirates. As they entered the captain's inner office, Luffy used his rubber strength to rip the entire thing out of the floor. They crashed through the window and landed right in the courtyard, which was quickly swarmed by Marine officers. Luffy and Nami had no choice but to start fighting their way through the crowd. As they fought off the guards, Zoro was free and ready to leave, but he decided to step in and help his new acquaintances. He sliced through the Marine ranks with ease. Luffy was convinced that the three of them were now a formal crew. However, the biggest challenge was still ahead: Captain Axehand Morgan himself. Morgan was a powerhouse and didn't mind taking them on alone. While Luffy and Zoro focused their efforts on the captain, Nami dealt with the remaining officers. He warned Luffy that next time they met, they might be enemies. Luffy didn't care about that. He told Coby they would always be friends regardless. After a heartfelt goodbye, Luffy, however, back at Marine headquarters, a high-ranking official received an urgent report about their escape. The report stated that a group of pirates had left Shell's town with the Grand Line maps in their possession. This news infuriated the higher-ups, especially the fact that a pirate wearing a straw hat was the one who stole them. Now, it wasn't just the Marines pursuing them, but another dangerous captain was entering the fray. Enter Buggy the Star Clown. He was more than prepared to murder anyone who stood between him and his prize. What a complete psycho. We get a glimpse into Luffy's childhood, where he was constantly trying to train his new rubber abilities, though back then, he mostly just succeeded in breaking the bar's furniture. Makino, the bar owner, told him that the broken chairs weren't the real issue. The real concern was the nature of the fruit itself. She explained that devil fruits like the one he ate are one of a kind, granting unique powers. However, eating one comes with a heavy price, a curse from the sea itself. The mother of the oceans turns against those who eat the fruit, stripping them of their ability to swim and their physical strength when submerged. Young Luffy didn't care about the risk. He felt strong and was desperate to join Shanks' crew. But Shanks was preparing to set sail for several months to continue his own search for the One Piece treasure. He told Luffy that he wasn't coming back to that port for a very long time, which left the boy devastated. Back in the present, Luffy's mood was back to its usual cheerful state. He was happily annoying Nami while she was trying to focus on cracking open the stolen safe. He was just so incredibly excited about his very first voyage as a pirate captain. Luffy was particularly protective of his old straw hat, which he considered his most precious treasure in the world. Meanwhile, Zoro was busy trying to get some sleep. Nami finally managed to get the safe open, but to their surprise, there was no gold or jewels inside. Just some mysterious documents. The documents were actually maps of the Grand Line. Nami explained that the Grand Line is a unique sea route filled with unimaginable wealth and danger. Luffy immediately piped up, saying that it's also where the legendary One Piece, the lost treasure of the Pirate King Gold Roger, is hidden. Zoro wasn't really familiar with the legend of the One Piece, even though he'd spent his life hunting pirates who were searching for it. Nami dismissed the whole thing as a myth, believing the treasure didn't even exist. But their conversation was cut short when they were suddenly ambushed by a group that launched a gas attack. The gas knocked them all unconscious, but not before Luffy managed to swallow the map to keep it safe. It turns out the attackers were working for Buggy the Star Clown. When they woke up, they found themselves locked inside a large wooden box, trying to figure out how to escape. Nami was frantic about the missing map, but Luffy calmly assured her it was in a safe place. Suddenly the box was opened, and they were standing in the center of Buggy's circus arena. Buggy was in a terrible mood because his show wasn't going well. Luffy recognized Buggy from a bounty poster he'd seen earlier. Luffy accidentally called him Boga, which didn't help Buggy's temper. Buggy bragged about being a true pirate original, but then got incredibly defensive, thinking someone had insulted his large red nose. He was furious that these three nobodies had supposedly stolen his map right from under him. Buggy claimed his crew of weirdos was the most feared in the world, and that he was the one destined to find the One Piece and become king. Luffy immediately challenged him, declaring that he would be the king. Meanwhile, Zoro was just itching to start a fight and take down everyone in the room. Nami tried a different tactic, offering Luffy as a powerful new recruit for Buggy's crew. She tossed Luffy's hat into the air to demonstrate his rubber powers, but she was really just creating a distraction so she could slip away and see the damage Buggy had inflicted on the town. It was a grim sight. She discovered that the entire audience was actually composed of terrified townspeople who were forced to applaud Buggy's every move. Buggy eventually locked up Zoro and Nami, deciding it was time to have a very serious chat with his new rubber-bodied captive to find out where the map went. Back at Shell's Town, Coby had successfully enlisted in the Marines and met Vice Admiral Garp, the legendary hero who once captured Gold Roger himself. Garp found himself strangely intrigued by this nervous new recruit. Meanwhile, back at the circus, Zoro and Nami were still trying to figure out their next move. They were locked in a cage, but Nami was an expert at picking locks and just needed a bit of time. They could hear Luffy shouting in the background, but he wasn't screaming in pain. Buggy was trying to torture him by tickling. Because of his rubber body, normal physical pain didn't affect him the same way. Buggy was desperate to find the Grand Line map, but the atmosphere changed when he noticed Luffy's straw hat. Buggy recognized it immediately, revealing that he used to serve on the same crew as Shanks the Red-Haired, whom he clearly despised with a passion. Buggy claimed that Shanks had betrayed him and that he had always wanted to be the main star. He tried to force the town's mayor to pull on Luffy's looms until he snapped. However, the mayor refused to participate in Buggy's cruelty, pointing out that the clown had already caused enough suffering by ruining their town. Furious at the mayor's defiance, Buggy grabbed a young boy from the crowd to use as a hostage in his twisted performance. Seeing this, Luffy managed to break free and delivered a powerful punch right to Buggy's head. But Buggy had a surprise of his own up his sleeve. He revealed that he had also eaten a devil fruit, the chop fruit. This gave him the power to split his body into multiple pieces and control them independently. He used this ability to overwhelm Luffy. Meanwhile, Nami finally succeeded in getting them out of their prison cell. Just as they escaped, a vengeful pirate named Coby appeared and landed a heavy blow on Zoro. He was furious because Zoro had claimed his brother's bounty years ago and had been hunting him ever since. Coby was determined to get revenge for his brother's death and take Zoro's head in return. Back in Shell's Town, Vice Admiral Garp called Coby in for a confrontation. He had information that Coby was seen hanging out with those pirates at the local tavern. Terrified of being punished, Coby came clean and explained that he had been a prisoner of Albuda until Luffy saved his life. Coby told Garp that even though he wanted to be a Marine more than anything, Luffy was the one who gave him his freedom. Garp was actually quite impressed by the young man's honesty. However, Garp was still on a mission to track down the Straw Hat Pirate. We then see another memory of Luffy as a child. The mountain bandits had returned to the bar and were harassing the locals again. Young Luffy stood up to them, but the bandit leader was about to hurt him without any mercy. Fortunately, Shanks and his crew arrived just in time, and this time, they weren't going to just sit back and watch. Shanks' crew, who were experts in combat, quickly and efficiently dealt with the bandits. But in the chaos, Luffy was kidnapped. Returning to the present circus, Luffy was trapped inside a tank that Buggy was slowly filling with seawater, which he knew would drain a Devil Fruit user's strength. Buggy threatened to drown him unless he revealed the location of the map. He even offered Luffy a chance to join his crew and be part of his glorious rise to power when he eventually found the One Piece. He promised Luffy would be loved by everyone if he just cooperated. Luffy flatly refused, saying he'd never work for someone like Buggy. As the water level rose, he flashed back to being taken out to sea by the bandit leader. Their small boat was suddenly attacked by a massive sea monster that knocked both of them into the water. The beast swallowed the bandit whole in an instant. Luffy was helpless and drowning since he couldn't swim, but Shanks dove in and saved him just in time. Shanks managed to pull him back toward the wreckage, but the terrifying sea monster was still circling them, preparing for another deadly strike against them both. Just as the creature was about to lunge, Shanks unleashed an incredible power. With just a single intense stare, he intimidated the massive beast so thoroughly that it turned around and fled into the depths of the ocean. It was a display of pure, raw willpower. Shanks' act of courage came at a high price, as he lost his arm to save Luffy, but he didn't care as long as the boy was safe. Back in the present, Luffy was on the verge of drowning while Zoro was in a desperate fight for his life against Coby. However, Coby accidentally sliced the rope holding Zoro back. Zoro capitalized on the mistake and quickly neutralized Coby. Meanwhile, Nami arrived at the circus and smashed the glass of the tank to free Luffy. As Luffy gasped for air, he accidentally coughed the swallowed map right out onto the floor. Buggy was ecstatic to finally have the map in his hands. Luffy was just relieved to have his Straw Hat back. Zoro and Nami prepared to take on Buggy, but they quickly realized how difficult it is to fight a man who can split himself into dozens of floating pieces. Buggy's Chop Chop powers were incredibly effective, allowing him to easily overwhelm Zoro and Nami. He could control every single part of his body independently, making him nearly impossible to hit. But then Luffy stepped up, ready to go head-to-head with the clown himself. Even though both their abilities came from devil fruits, Buggy's powers seemed superior at first. However, Luffy and his friends used their heads. They managed to catch Buggy's floating body parts and lock them inside several wooden crates, leaving the clown as nothing more than a tiny, helpless little torso. He constantly declared to anyone listening that his name was Monkey D. Luffy and that he was destined to become the king of the pirates. He then unleashed his Gum Gum Bazooka massive high-impact palm strike that sent Buggy the Clown flying into the horizon. With the battle over, he handed the precious map to Nami since she was the one with the navigational skills. Since she was their navigator, they made sure she had the route. Before departing, they liberated every single prisoner, proving to the local mayor that while Luffy was indeed a pirate, he was a very different breed of one. Meanwhile, back in Shellstown, Vice Admiral Garp had Captain Axe Hand Morgan displayed in the courtyard as a public example of the consequences for his rampant corruption. To show his gratitude for saving the town from Morgan's tyranny, the mayor personally thanked Luffy and provided him with plenty of food. This brought back memories for Luffy, thinking about how he realized he couldn't just join Shanks' crew as a kid. He knew back then that he would eventually need his own ship, his own crew, and a path of his own. He needed a crew that believed in him so he could set sail toward his grand dream of being the king of the pirates. It was at that moment years ago that Shanks entrusted him with his most prized possession, his signature straw hat. The deal was that Luffy would return it when they met again, but only after he had become a truly formidable pirate. Luffy was deeply moved because Shanks had been like a father figure to him, and he feared he might never see him again. In the present, Nami carefully mended the hat, recognizing that for Luffy this wasn't just headwear. It was a literal treasure. What's truly amazing about Luffy is his unshakable belief in himself and his journey. He has this philosophy that if the road ahead is too easy, then it's probably not the right path to take. However, Nami wasn't fully committed to the crew just yet. Behind the scenes, she made a secret phone call to a mysterious contact, informing them of her current progress and whereabouts. She confirmed she had the map and was currently luring Luffy right into their trap, though she admitted she was starting to feel a bit of apprehension. Switching perspectives to 7 years earlier in Sierra Village, the alarm bells were ringing loudly because everyone thought pirates were finally invading the town. Of course, it was all just a prank by Usopp, a habit he kept up even as he grew older. Meanwhile, Luffy and his friends had just finished painting their official Straw Hat crew flag on their journey. Zoro suddenly pointed out that their small boat seemed to be springing a leak somewhere below deck. Nami went to check the damage and realized her specialized communication tools, the ones she used to talk to her secret contacts, had been ruined. This forced the group to realize they desperately needed a sturdier, larger vessel. They decided their next stop would be the Gecko Islands, specifically aimed at a place called Syrup Village. Back on Vice Admiral Garp's ship, the new cadets were being taught the ropes of naval operations. Coby ended up having to fix a poorly tied knot made by Helmeppo, who was clearly annoyed by Kobe's diligence. When the Admiral arrived to inspect the work, he noticed that it was Coby who had actually done the job correctly. Because his work was so precise, Coby earned the Vice Admiral's respect and was told he didn't need to stay with the low-level apprentices anymore. Having clearly learned a lot from his time on other ships, this promotion sparked a massive wave of jealousy in Helmeppo. Simultaneously, the Straw Hat crew finally arrived at the peaceful Syrup Village. Zoro was still grumbling about the fact that Buggy the Clown had a 15 million berry bounty and they had left without collecting it. The catch was that since they were now all fugitives from the law themselves, there was no way for him to walk into a marine base and claim the reward. While he complained, Nami was already scouting for a ship to steal. Nami was looking for a suitable vessel to commandeer in the harbor. Elsewhere, Buggy had managed to pull his body parts back together. A messenger arrived to tell him that a powerful pirate named Arlong wanted an audience with him. Buggy, being arrogant, didn't want anyone ruining his performance and prepared to attack the messenger. Unfortunately for Buggy, the messenger was surprisingly skilled and quickly knocked the clown out cold. Back with the crew, Nami explained to Luffy that this island was famous for its expert shipbuilders. Hearing this, Luffy decided he didn't want to just steal any old boat. He wanted to find the perfect ship for the Straw Hat pirates. Luffy was set on finding the ultimate ship, but Nami and Zoro were well aware that they were completely broke and would likely have to exploit some weak security to get what they needed. Suddenly, Luffy spotted a beautiful ship with a distinct ram's head on the prow, and was immediately enchanted by it. That's when they met Usopp, who cleared things up by explaining that he wasn't the owner. He was just the guy who cleaned bird droppings off the decks. However, he mentioned that his close friend was the actual owner of everything there, and offered to talk to her to see if they could strike a deal for the vessel. As Usopp led the crew to the mansion of his friend Kaya, her massive estate made it clear she was incredibly wealthy. Meanwhile, Coby had gained so much of the Vice Admiral's trust that they were actually playing a strategic board game together. Back at the mansion, it became apparent that Usopp wasn't exactly a welcome guest to everyone there. Usopp faced some resistance, but Kaya herself appeared alongside her butler, Claudor, who clearly harbored a deep dislike for Usopp. Since it was Kaya's birthday and she cherished Usopp's wild stories, she decided to ignore her butler's warnings and invited the entire crew inside for a proper celebration. She treated them to a full dinner, hot baths, and even fresh changes of clothes. Despite the butler's obvious disapproval, it was her special day, and having Usopp there was the best gift she could ask for. Kaya was quite sickly, but Usopp's imaginative tales made her feel better and gave her a reason to smile despite her condition. Luffy was overwhelmed by the choices and had absolutely no clue what to wear despite the massive wardrobe available. Nami was trying her best to look sophisticated and elegant, but her two idiot companions clearly didn't understand the first thing about fashion. Luffy then decided to make a bet with Nami that he could convince Kaya to give them the ship. Luffy was confident he could talk Kaya into handing over the vessel, but if his charm failed, they agreed to go with Nami's original plan and just steal it. Meanwhile, the butler Claudor was acting strangely overprotective, hovering over Lady Kaya as if he were guarding her precious prize. Even though he seemed to be caring for her, the way he prepared her food was suspicious, almost as if he were trying to slowly poison her. He demanded that his staff make sure the night was absolutely perfect. Simultaneously, Coby was learning about high-stakes decision-making while playing against the Vice Admiral. Coby actually managed to win the game against the Vice Admiral, which impressed the old man quite a bit. Over at the party, the Straw Hat crew was all dressed up and having a great time until Lady Kaya made her entrance. Zoro, however, couldn't shake the feeling that he had seen Claudor's face somewhere before in his past. Zoro tried to pinpoint where he knew the butler from, but Claudor flatly denied ever being in any of the locations Zoro mentioned. Dinner was eventually served, but Kaya was restricted to a very specific diet, and a bowl of poison soup was placed right in front of her by the butler. Luffy desperately wanted to talk to Kaya since she technically owned all the ships for sale, though she explained that her advisor, Mr. Mary, still handled the finances following her parents' passing. However, she noted that after that very night, full control of the port and the fleet would finally pass entirely to her. Luffy took that opening to introduce himself properly, making it very clear he wasn't a marine, but a pirate leader. He boasted about his crew's exploits fighting, stealing, and raiding, and shared how he had been dreaming of being a real pirate ever since he was just a little kid. He told her that the ship with the ram figurehead was the perfect vessel to take them to the Grand Line, where he would find the ultimate treasure and become king of the pirates. He then asked for her answer, but Claudor was absolutely outraged that pirates were even allowed at the table. Just then, Kaya had a sudden coughing fit and started feeling unwell, leading the butler to rush her away to her private quarters. Despite the chaos, Kaya insisted the crew stay the night as guests. Luffy took this as a positive sign for his request. Meanwhile, Helmeppo went to talk to the Vice Admiral. The Vice Admiral was still enjoying his game, but he received news that a Straw Hat pirate flag had been spotted at a local bar in Syrup Village. Deducing their likely location, he decided to send Coby on a mission to track them down and confirm if they were actually there. Coby's intelligence had earned him a promotion from cadet, giving him a real chance to prove his worth. Back at the mansion, Mr. Mary, the financial manager, was desperate to speak with Kaya. He found it highly suspicious that she was in the process of transferring all her corporate rights over to Claudor. The whole situation felt wrong to Mary, but before he could warn Kaya, the butler intercepted him. It turns out Claudor was actually a cold-blooded pirate and assassin in disguise, and he ruthlessly murdered Mr. Mary to keep him from interfering with his dark plan. Before Mary could say a word, he was gone. Elsewhere, Buggy the Clown had to answer to Arlong, a terrifying pirate with a bounty exceeding 20 million berries. In the pirate world, your bounty dictates your rank, and Buggy was clearly lower on the food chain than the Sharkman Arlong. Buggy was in trouble for not paying his required tribute for operating in Arlong's waters. When questioned about his recent activities and the town he raided, Buggy frantically shifted the blame, claiming it wasn't him disrespecting Arlong, but rather a new rubber pirate named Luffy. Buggy told Arlong that Luffy had stolen the maps to the Grand Line and was actively searching for the One Piece. He begged for a chance to go after Luffy himself to settle the score, but Arlong remained silent. For the time being, Buggy was forced to return to his base while the threat loomed. Back at the mansion during the early hours of the morning, Luffy ran into Zoro, who was looking for a drink and a huge amount of food. Meanwhile, Nami did what she does best and ended up in Kaya's room, claiming she was just looking for the bathroom, but with a pillowcase stuffed with stolen decor, there was no hiding her true intentions. However, Kaya was so lonely that she didn't even mind. She just wanted someone to talk to for a change. Meanwhile, in another part of the house, Luffy and Zoro finally crossed paths with Usopp in the kitchen. They found Usopp armed with his slingshot, and he admitted he was excited about the idea of a grand adventure. He confessed he'd love to set sail but felt he couldn't leave Kaya behind. They weren't a couple, but they had been inseparable best friends since she lost her parents years ago. Kaya truly appreciated it because his stories were the only thing that brought her joy in her isolation. It was a classic friend zone situation, but Usopp didn't mind. When he showed off his incredible marksmanship, Luffy was genuinely impressed by his skill with the slingshot. Usopp revealed he learned everything from his father, Usopp. Luffy realized he actually knew the man. Usopp was a key member of Shanks' legendary crew. Luffy confirmed that his dad was a great guy and a top-tier sniper, which made Usopp's day. Zoro, however, was still just focused on finding some alcohol. Usopp offered to lead Zoro to the cellar, while Luffy stayed behind to snack on the very same soup the Klahadore had poisoned for Kaya. When Zoro and Usopp reached the storage area, they were horrified to find the lifeless body of Mr. Mary on the floor, showing signs of a very specific kind of attack. Zoro recognized the nature of the wounds immediately. Just then, Klahadore stepped out of the shadows and revealed his true identity. He was actually Kuro, the infamous captain of the Black Cat Pirates, a man with a 16 million berry bounty on his head. Kuro had faked his own death years prior just to embed himself within this wealthy family as part of a long-term con. Zoro was more than ready to collect that bounty, but he realized he was dealing with an incredibly fast opponent, who also happened to have hidden accomplices waiting to strike. The henchman managed to knock Zoro down, though Usopp found a way to scramble away. Kuro ordered his men to dispose of the bodies so his secret would remain safe. Meanwhile, Nami and Kaya were actually bonding upstairs, with Nami realizing that despite the wealth, Kaya was just a kind, lonely girl. Kuro's crew tossed a dazed Zoro and the body of Mary into a deep well, throwing his swords in after them. Usopp tried to alert the villagers, but because of his history of lying, absolutely no one believed his warnings about a pirate invasion. It was the classic boy who cried wolf scenario. Even when he was a child, his sick mother wouldn't take his pirate warnings seriously, despite the town's constant fear of their return ever since his father left. However, that night, he finally found one person who took him seriously, Coby, who had just arrived in the village with the Marines. Coby and the other cadets were better than no help at all. Down in the darkness of the well, Zoro finally regained consciousness next to Mary's corpse and started looking for any possible way to climb out. Above ground, Usopp was frantically trying to convince Coby that the butler Klahadore was actually a pirate. Usopp claimed the butler was Captain Kuro of the Black Cat Pirates. But Helmeppo mocked him, stating that his father, Captain Morgan, had executed Kuro years ago. Usopp stood his ground, mentioning that Luffy the Straw Hat was also involved, which immediately caught Koby's attention. Knowing Luffy was his friend, Coby decided to investigate further. Meanwhile, Nami discovered Luffy passed out because he had devoured the entire pot of poisoned soup meant for Kaya. She couldn't move him, so she was forced to hide in the cupboards when she heard people approaching. From her hiding spot, Nami overheard the butler and his staff discussing their true identities and the fact that Luffy had accidentally ingested the poison intended for Kaya. Kuro ordered his men to take the unconscious Luffy and throw him into the well along with the green-haired one. Just as they were about to move Luffy, Coby and the Marines knocked on the door. Klahadore took charge and calmly spoke with Coby, who explained they were checking for reports of pirate activity. Usopp shouted from the background that Klahadore was a pirate with razor-sharp blades on his hands. Coby inspected the butler but found nothing suspicious. Klahadore smoothly manipulated the situation, painting Usopp as a local laughingstock and a pathological liar whose mental state had deteriorated ever since his mother passed away. It made Usopp look completely unreliable. Helmeppo was convinced they were wasting their time, especially since their real target was the criminal Monkey D. Luffy. Coincidentally, the butler claimed Luffy was passed out in the kitchen after drinking too much and offered to hand him over to the Marines just to get him off the property. He told his staff to bring the unconscious, poisoned Luffy to the door to give him to Coby. Usopp was powerless to prove his claims, and Coby found himself in a difficult spot with no evidence to act against the butler despite his gut feeling. Coby tried to ask a few more probing questions, but even when Nami made a noise in the background, Klahadore played it off perfectly. He insisted that since the criminal was now in Marine custody, he had other urgent matters to attend to for Lady Kaya. Down in the well, Zoro was struggling to find a way out, but the walls were too slick. His mind drifted back 7 years to his training days at the Shimatsuki Village Dojo, where he was working tirelessly to become the greatest swordsman in the world. He recalled a humiliating defeat at the hands of Kuina, the sensei's daughter, right in front of their master, Koshiro. Zoro was devastated by the loss, and stubbornly told Kuina that they weren't friends, vowing that he would eventually surpass her in skill. Zoro argued that he only lost because they were using wooden practice swords, and claimed that in a real fight with steel katanas, he would win. Kuina accepted his challenge for a real duel, but warned him that he had to be prepared for a fight where his life would be on the line. Back in the present, Zoro snapped out of the memory and tried a new strategy to scale the well. Meanwhile, Usopp managed to sneak into Kaya's bedroom to warn her that Clador was actually a dangerous pirate who was planning to kill her for her fortune. Usopp laid out the whole truth about the butler's greed and murderous intent, but Kaya thought his story was completely insane. She was so offended by his accusations against her trusted guardian that she actually slapped Usopp across the face and refused to listen. Usopp refused to leave her side despite the rejection, determined to protect her. However, the clock finally struck midnight, marking Kaya's 18th birthday. This was the moment Kuro had been waiting for to finally set his master plan into motion along with his crew. The Black Cap pirates revealed themselves and began sealing all the exits to the mansion, ensuring no one would leave alive. Kaya finally realized Usopp was telling the truth when Nami burst into the room and confirmed that her life was in immediate danger. Nami explained that Kuro had been slowly poisoning her for years to keep her weak. The mansion turned into a terrifying hunting ground as the pirates began their search. Kuro declared it was time to finish the job, but Nami, Usopp, and Kaya managed to slip through a hidden passage in the walls. As they hid behind the walls, Kaya's illness caused her to cough, which Kuro immediately heard. He smirked, knowing it was only a matter of time before he found them. Meanwhile, Zoro continued to struggle in the well, flashing back to his duel with Kuina, where he used 2 katanas. Despite having 2 swords against her one, Kuina's skill was vastly superior. She easily knocked him down and mocked the idea that more swords meant more power. She proved that his technique was lacking, and that he had a long way to go before he could ever hope to beat her. After losing so decisively, a frustrated Zoro told her to just kill him, but Kuina was kind-hearted. Instead of ending him, she encouraged him to keep training to become the world's best, telling him that one day his strength would grow, and he would finally be able to win. Kuina worried about her own future as a female swordsman, but Zoro made a solemn promise to her that they would both train every single day until one of them became the absolute greatest in the world. They agreed that their rivalry would push them both to the very top. That pact forged a deep bond of friendship between them. Back in the present, Coby was questioning Helmeppo about why he was so quick to trust the butler. Helmeppo brushed him off, calling Coby a sycophant and claiming he was only being difficult because of his previous ties to Luffy. Just as the tension between the 2 Marines rose, Luffy suddenly woke up. Still reeling from the poison, he ended up projectile vomiting all over Helmeppo, which was one way to end an argument. Meanwhile, Kaya was leading Nami and Usopp to her parents' old abandoned bedroom for safety. Kaya was devastated by Clador's betrayal, but she remembered that her parents' room contained a master lever that could unlock all the mansion's doors and restore power. Unfortunately, the lever was old and rusted tight, requiring more strength than they had to move it. Down in the well, Zoro had another memory. He recalled the darkest day of his childhood when Sensei Koshiro informed him that Kuina had died in a tragic accident. Zoro was absolutely crushed by the news, but he refused to let their shared dream die with her. He was determined to honor the promise they had made. At her funeral, Zoro begged his master for permission to carry Kuina's sword, the Wadoichi Monji. He vowed to become the greatest swordsman in the world for both of them, carrying her spirit in his blade. Empowered by this memory, Zoro finally managed to claw his way out of the well. His master entrusted him with the sword, and in the present, Zoro stood tall once more. Luffy, now awake and energized, told Coby that he had to get back to the mansion because Kaya was in grave danger from her butler. He emphasized that she was completely innocent and didn't deserve any of this. Helmeppo was ready to just shoot Luffy on the spot, arguing he was a criminal anyway, but Zoro intervened. He gave Helmeppo a mocking nickname and knocked him out cold with a single powerful punch. The crew needed to move fast to save their friends from Kuro's clutches. Coby, being a Marine, couldn't officially help them, but he didn't stop them either as they rushed back to the estate. Inside, Kuro had finally found the room where the 3 were hiding. They had to stay absolutely silent, knowing that if the deadly pirates spotted them, he would kill them without hesitation. Luffy and Zoro burst into the mansion just in time and split up to cover more ground. Zoro ran into the Black Cat pirate goons, while Kuro finally cornered Nami and Kaya. Usopp bravely tried to launch an attack with his slingshot to protect them, but the results were less than effective. Usopp's projectiles did nothing to slow Kuro down, and the pirate prepared to strike him and Kaya down. Suddenly, Luffy's rubber arm stretched across the room, intercepting the blow and saving his friends. Even though Luffy's body was made of rubber, he found that Kuro was a difficult target to hit. Kuro, known as the Man of 1,000 Plans, was too fast for Luffy's standard punches, and his finger blades were sharp enough to cut even rubber. Meanwhile, Zoro temporarily lost hold of his most precious sword during his fight. But the loss only fueled his determination to fight even harder and more skillfully. Zoro managed to reclaim his blade and swiftly took out the rest of the Black Cat Kuro. Back with Luffy, he realized he had to stop attacking wildly and start listening for Kuro's movements. By concentrating and staying perfectly still, he was finally able to predict Kuro's high-speed dashes and dodge the lethal blades. Luffy eventually caught Kuro by the arms and delivered a devastating Gum Gum Bell, a massive headbutt that sent the pirate crashing through the wall and out of the house. His friends were overjoyed by the victory, and it seemed the Marines would now take charge of the remaining Black Cat pirates. Since Luffy and his crew were also wanted men, they couldn't stick around for the Marines to arrive. As a token of her immense gratitude, Kaya gifted them the very ship Luffy had admired. She mentioned that Mary had loved and maintained that ship perfectly. So in his honor, Luffy gave it a special name. He named the vessel the Going Merry. Feeling optimistic as ever, Luffy officially invited Usopp to join the crew, noting that they needed a talented sniper just like his father was. Usopp hesitated at first, feeling like he should stay behind to continue looking after Lady Kaya. Kaya wouldn't hear of him staying out of obligation. She encouraged him to go out and see the world, so he could return one day with real stories of his own. After a heartfelt goodbye and a kiss from Kaya, Usopp officially joined the group. The Straw Hat Pirates finally had their first real full-size pirate ship. Luffy was beyond excited to finally set a course for the Grand Line. However, Kuro wasn't actually captured. He managed to sneak away on a small boat into the open sea. Coby felt terrible about letting him slip through his fingers, but on the official record he was praised for driving the pirates away from the island. Usopp immediately started acting like he was the one in charge, even making his own flag and jokingly challenging Luffy for the title of captain. They spent their first hours at sea bickering about who was really the boss. Luffy laughed it off, thinking their journey was going to be easy from here on out. His confidence was cut short when marine warships suddenly appeared and began an all-out bombardment of the Going Merry. When Luffy grabbed the telescope to see who was attacking them, he turned pale with shock. The Vice Admiral leading the fleet was none other than his own grandfather. To understand why this was so terrifying, you have to look back at Luffy's childhood. Even as a small boy, he had tried to build a little pirate raft, but his grandfather was dead set against it. Garp wanted him to become a noble marine, and when Luffy refused to give up his pirate dream, Garp literally smashed the boy's boat to pieces. Garp had dragged him off for brutal training that day, determined to beat the pirate dream out of him. Now, facing his grandfather's massive cannons once again, Luffy was ready to fight back. The problem was that Nami was the only one who actually knew how to handle a ship, while the rest of the crew was completely clueless about naval combat. They were all trying to figure out their next move, and Luffy decided to prove to this admiral that his ship wasn't as untouchable as it seemed. It almost looked too easy to take that vessel down, especially when the old man actually hurled a massive cannonball using nothing but his bare hands. However, Luffy quickly inflated his body with air, acting like a giant trampoline that sent the projectile flying right back, smashing directly into the ship's front mast with a violent impact, which provided the perfect distraction to delay the Navy's pursuit. With this opening, Nami took command and set the sails to full speed, allowing the crew to celebrate their narrow escape as they vanished into the thick morning mist. Despite the successful getaway, Luffy was feeling pretty downcast and conflicted about the sudden appearance of his grandfather on the battlefield. But something quickly lifted his spirits and caught his attention. The rest of the crew actually worried for a second that he'd been shot in the head because of his reaction. But it was actually a delicious aroma that caught his nose. Following that scent, they navigated the Going Merry until they reached the Baratie, a famous floating restaurant that caters to travelers, marines, and even pirates alike. The only problem was that the place was absolutely packed to the brim, and Luffy's simple plan to just walk in and eat hit a major wall. They were told a reservation would take several weeks to secure, and Luffy's usual boast about being Monkey D. Luffy, the future king of the pirates, didn't earn him any special favors here. Eventually, Nami had to step in and bribe her way to a table, though they still had no idea what kind of exotic food they were about to encounter. Even though they were uncertain about the menu, their hunger was far too great to care at that point. Deep within the restaurant's kitchen, a highly talented chef named Sanji was busy preparing incredibly elegant and sophisticated dishes for the guests. However, the head chef, Zeph, known for his wooden leg, wasn't a fan of Sanji's fancy culinary style. According to the old man, Those high-class plates were more likely to scare away the regular customers than satisfy them. Zeph firmly believed that serving such refined meals would alienate their usual clientele. But Sanji was absolutely fed up with the monotony of just serving basic ribs all day. This led to a heated argument with the head chef, which resulted in Sanji being demoted to cleaning tables for the day. While working as a waiter, however, he ended up intervening in a violent brawl that broke out right in the middle of the dining area. Sanji showcased some incredible martial arts prowess, ending the fight using nothing but his powerful kicks, which immediately made Luffy think this waiter was someone special. As he began serving the Straw Hat crew, Sanji couldn't help but start flirting heavily with Nami, clearly captivated by her beauty. This bold behavior caught everyone's attention as he hovered around her while the rest of the restaurant watched the scene unfold. The entire room was teasing Nami about the extra attention she was getting, but back at the Navy, the Vice Admiral was demanding that someone clean up the mess they left behind. He wasn't looking for standard reinforcements though. Instead, he made a direct call to a legendary bounty hunter. This individual was unique because his own bounty had actually been rescinded by the Navy in exchange for his services in high-stakes situations. While this hunter was busy effortlessly slicing through enemies in a different pirate battle, the Vice Admiral reached out with a specific mission for him. He wanted him to track down Luffy, a rubber-body pirate who, on the surface, didn't seem like a major threat. However, the catch was that this kid was becoming so influential and powerful, the traditional forces were struggling to stop his momentum across the seas. The target was someone who could supposedly split a massive ship in half with a single strike. Meanwhile, the bounty hunter was already busy hunting down Don Krieg, a notorious pirate with a 17 million berry bounty who specialized in heavy weaponry. In a display of terrifying skill, Mihawk simply sliced through the incoming bullets before taking the pirate out for good, solidifying his reputation as a monster. After finishing his current business, the hunter accepted the new contract to bring in the rubber pirate. At that very moment, Luffy was completely oblivious, stuffing his face and chugging milk to celebrate what he called a victory. Nami, on the other hand, viewed their situation as a complete and utter disaster where nobody actually knew what they were doing, leaving the crew in a state of chaotic uncertainty. Word was getting around that the Vice Admiral was actually Luffy's grandfather, but the immediate problem was the massive dinner bill that had just arrived. Luffy tried to settle the tab with nothing but his autograph, which prompted the Baratie's head chef to intervene. He made it very clear that they don't give out free meals or run tabs, and he wasn't buying into Luffy's grand delusions about becoming a king. Since Luffy couldn't pay, the head chef dragged him into the kitchen and put him to work washing dishes to pay off his debt. Around the same time, Sanji was trying to force his way back into the cooking rotation, but Zeph was still adamant about not letting him serve his experimental dishes in the restaurant. However, everything changed the moment Luffy actually got a taste of Sanji's cooking. As soon as Luffy tried the food, he was blown away and realized that Sanji possessed an incredible level of talent. Nami was feeling a bit uneasy because Luffy was keeping secrets about his connection to the Vice Admiral, but she was hiding plenty of things herself. She ended up at the bar, ordered a bottle of rum, and started digging for information about a specific safe route to the islands she was looking for. A pirate sitting at the bar noticed her interest and offered to guide her for a hefty fee of 6,000 berries. There was a major catch though. The deal required her to travel completely alone. This meant she would have to turn her back on her new friends and abandon the entire crew. A secret choice that weighed heavily on her as she considered her next move. Coby was curious and asked exactly who this Mihawk person was. The explanation was chilling. He is the undisputed greatest swordsman on the planet, with no one even coming close to his skill with a blade. Furthermore, Mihawk holds the title of a Shishibukai, one of the 7 most formidable pirates who have struck a controversial bargain with the world government. The deal essentially allows these 7 pirates to continue their lawless activities as long as they agree to do the Navy's dirty work when called upon. It was a harsh lesson for Coby on how the world truly functions behind the scenes. Meanwhile, as Luffy was still slaving away at the sink, he struck up a conversation with Sanji about his culinary skills. Luffy couldn't stop praising the food, telling Sanji that it was the best he'd ever had and that he shouldn't be stuck in just one place. Sanji confessed that his ultimate ambition was to become the greatest chef on the 7 seas. He spoke of a legendary location filled with exotic fish, unique seaweed, and rare spices that most people haven't even dreamed of seeing or tasting in their lifetimes. Finding that mythical place and becoming the world's top chef was the one thing Sanji truly lived for. In typical fashion, Luffy immediately started pushing him to chase that dream and go after what he wanted. Right then, a starving man stumbled into the kitchen desperate for a meal, and Sanji didn't hesitate for even a single second to help him out. Despite the head chef's strict orders to throw the man out, Sanji whipped up a plate of meat and rice to feed the hungry stranger. Luffy saw this act of genuine kindness and realized Sanji had a heart of gold beneath his rough exterior. Seeing that the head chef didn't truly appreciate the young cook's worth, Luffy decided right then that Sanji needed to join his crew. Luffy wanted Sanji to be the official chef of the Straw Hat Pirates as they searched for the One Piece treasure. However, the man-eating revealed he was once part of Don Krieg's massive pirate fleet. They had been determined to find Gold D. Roger's legendary treasure. But the Grand Line had turned into a nightmare that completely annihilated their entire operation. He explained that they lost more than 50 ships to the treacherous sea, leaving him as the sole survivor of the tragedy. Meanwhile, Nami and Zoro were passing the time by playing a game where they tried to guess details about each other's pasts. During this exchange, it came to light that Zoro had only ever had one real friend throughout his entire life. Zoro confessed his lonely past, while Nami revealed she had never really had anyone to count on. Coby, on the other hand, was busy questioning the Vice Admiral about why the laws don't seem to apply equally to everyone. The Admiral admitted that he used to be just as naive about following the rules, but explained that the harsh reality of the world forced him to adapt if he wanted to survive in the Marines. The Vice Admiral insisted that survival required playing by these new, darker rules. At the same time, a very intoxicated Usopp was bragging loudly about being the greatest sharpshooter in the East Blue and claiming he had single-handedly destroyed a Navy ship. The major problem was that he was telling these tall tales while sitting right next to the terrifying Mihawk. Mihawk asked if Usopp was the captain of the crew, but Nami stepped in to clarify that the real leader was actually Monkey D. Luffy. When Zoro laid eyes on the newcomer, he recognized him instantly as Draculae Mihawk, the world's most powerful swordsman. While Zoro felt it was a massive honor to meet him, he had much more than a simple greeting in mind. Zoro wasn't interested in just paying respects. He wanted to challenge Mihawk to a duel to the death. This was his ultimate dream, to defeat the strongest man with a blade and claim that title for himself. Even though Mihawk was somewhat skeptical of the challenge, he surprisingly accepted the offer, setting the stage for a legendary encounter. Mihawk agreed to kill Zoro at dawn and then take the Straw Hat captain into custody. Meanwhile, Luffy was still struggling with his dishwashing duties and ended up breaking several plates. He decided to confront Shepsef, arguing that Sanji shouldn't have to give up on his dreams just to stay at the restaurant. Especially since the Sanji was clearly a good person deep down. Luffy pointed out that feeding a hungry beggar in secret was proof of Sanji's kindness. Just then, the rest of the crew arrived, and Nami was visibly terrified. She was worried about Luffy being targeted by a Shichibukai sent by his grandfather, and she was equally panicked about Zoro's suicidal decision to challenge such a monster to a fight. Nami knew Zoro was skilled, but compared to Mihawk, he was practically an insect. However, this was Zoro's lifelong ambition, and the only path to becoming the greatest was to take down the man who currently held the title. Luffy simply stated that he had no right to stand in the way of anyone's dream, even if it meant risking their life. Nami was frustrated because she thought they were supposed to be a team, but Zoro's blunt comment suggested they weren't even friends. This pushed her over the edge, and in a fit of anger, she decided she was done with the Straw Hats. She planned to take the deal with the other pirate to reach the island she was searching for, leaving the crew behind. As Zoro prepared for the fight, Mihawk mused about how strange it was for the Navy to send him after such a small-time pirate like Luffy. As the battle began, Mihawk showed his absolute disdain for the challenge by drawing only a tiny dagger hidden within his crucifix pendant, rather than his legendary sword. Mihawk mocked him, saying he doesn't use a bazooka to hunt a rabbit, implying Zoro wasn't worth his full power. Zoro charged in with his two katanas, giving it everything he had, but he couldn't even manage to graze the master swordsman. Mihawk was simply on another level entirely, moving with a grace that Zoro couldn't hope to match. The Shichibukai was incredibly fast and demonstrated that true combat is about skill and precision, not just raw power. He seemed to be merely playing with Zoro until he finally grew bored of the exchange. In one swift motion, he plunged the small dagger directly into Zoro's chest while the entire Straw Hat crew watched in absolute horror. Even Nami, who had planned to leave, came back because she couldn't abandon her friends in such a moment. Zoro refused to back down because of a promise he had made long ago. Recognizing the young man's incredible spirit, Mihawk decided to grant him the honor of dying by Yoru, the legendary black blade that is known as one of the world's strongest weapons. Zoro placed Kuina's sword in his mouth, preparing his ultimate three-sword style to face Mihawk's final strike. He spun his blades and charged with everything he had left, but the sheer power of Mihawk's attack shattered his katanas into pieces. Knowing that a scar on the back is the ultimate shame for a swordsman, Zoro turned to face his opponent head-on. Zoro stood his ground and waited for the killing blow to strike his chest rather than flee. Mihawk delivered a massive slash across his torso, causing him to collapse as Luffy rushed to his side in desperation. In the aftermath, Mihawk turned to Luffy and asked what his ultimate goal in this world was, and the answer was as bold as ever: to become the Pirate King. Mihawk found Luffy's ambition quite intriguing, suggesting that the world might actually need more reckless dreamers like him. He then turned his attention back to the fallen Zoro, telling him that it was far too early for him to die yet. He challenged Zoro to get stronger and find him again one day for a true rematch. After leaving the invitation for a future duel, Mihawk departed without taking anyone, and Zoro was losing a terrifying amount of blood and was fading fast, whispering that he feared he had let everyone down by failing to become the greatest swordsman right then and there. Luffy quickly reassured him, saying that he could never be a disappointment because he was his very first crewmate. Moved by this, Zoro made a solemn vow to Luffy, swearing that he would never lose another fight until the day he finally faced Mihawk again and claimed the title of the world's best. Zoro finally succumbed to his injuries, dropping his sword and losing consciousness from the extreme blood loss. With his friend in critical condition, Luffy knew they needed a doctor immediately. He ran back into the Baratie to find Sanji, hoping the talented waiter could help save his dying comrade. Sanji was there with Zeph when Luffy explained the life or death situation. The nearest proper doctor was a 2-day sail away, which Zoro didn't have time for, so Sanji stepped up to help. Seeing the urgency, Chef Zeph decided to take charge of the medical treatment himself, ordering Sanji to gather the necessary supplies immediately. Zeph arrived with a strange assortment of tools, sharp knives, fresh fish, and a bottle of whiskey. After stitching the deep wounds, he applied fish skin to the injury to help the healing process. However, because Zoro had lost so much blood, his survival was still very much in question, and everyone was on edge. Zeph told them they needed to stay by his side, talking to him and sharing stories to give him the strength to hold on to life. Meanwhile, over on the Navy vessel, Mihawk was meeting with the Vice Admiral in his private quarters. He revealed that he hadn't actually brought the Rubber Man back as they had originally planned. As a Shichibukai, Mihawk made it clear that he doesn't take orders from anyone, not even the world government itself. He confessed that he was curious to see what kind of chaos Luffy would cause once he finally reached the Grand Line. He also noted that it was no secret that Luffy was the Vice Admiral's own grandson. Mihawk suggested that the kid might actually have what it takes to find the One Piece, which sent the Vice Admiral into a blind rage, causing him to smash up his own office. He told Coby he'd be eating elsewhere, while back at the restaurant, Sanji was already busy preparing a meal for the remaining Straw Hat members. Luffy was staying focused, taking the time to carefully clean the Wado Ichimonji, the precious sword that meant everything to Zoro. He wanted to make sure it was pristine for when Zoro finally woke up. And he even asked Sanji to prepare Zoro's absolute favorite dish to help him recover. Luffy was fully confident that his friend would pull through. During the wait, Sanji revealed that Zeph used to be a legendary pirate captain himself, leading a crew of cooking pirates and earning the fearsome nickname Red Leg Zeph. He then began to recount the story of how they first crossed paths. Nearly a decade ago, a young Sanji was working as an apprentice chef on a passenger ship called the Orbit. Even back then, his only dream was to find the All Blue, a mythical sea where every type of fish and spice in the world coexists. The other chefs on board used to mock him constantly, claiming such a place was just a fairy tale. They were convinced the All Blue was a myth, but their debate was cut short when the Orbit was boarded by Zeph's pirate crew. Zeph tried some of the ship's food and wanted to add oregano to it, but little Sanji actually attacked him for trying to mess with his culinary creation. Showing his early passion for cooking, Zeph was actually impressed by the foul-mouthed kid's skills and his bold dream of finding the All Blue. However, a massive storm suddenly hit, sinking the Orbit and leaving Sanji stranded. When he finally woke up, he was on a barren rock of an island with only Captain Zeph for company, and it appeared they were the only ones who survived. With no one else left alive, they were facing a desperate situation with almost no food. They only had 2 bags of supplies, so they divided them and agreed to keep watch for ships from opposite ends of the island. On the 3rd day, Sanji was already obsessively checking his dwindling rations and searching for fresh water. 25 days passed in a blur of hunger and rain. Sanji actually spotted a ship at one point, but it missed him and sailed away into the distance. By the 30-day mark, his food was almost gone. The situation grew even more dire as 50 and eventually 70 days went by without any rescue and his rations finally ran out completely. Sanji had the smaller bag and assumed Zeph must have kept more food for himself. Driven by hunger and desperation, he went to confront the captain with a knife, but when he cut open Zeph's large bag, he found nothing but a pile of gold and jewels. There wasn't a single scrap of food to be found, leaving him wondering how the old man had stayed alive. The horrific truth was that Zeph had actually severed and eaten his own leg to survive those 70 long days. He did it because he believed the All Blue was real and wanted to ensure his dream lived on through Sanji. He gave every single bit of the actual fruit to the boy so that at least one of them might make it off that rock. Sanji was kept alive by Zeph's incredible sacrifice until they were finally rescued after 85 days. Zeph had truly acted like a legendary leader by putting the boy's life before his own. Back in the present, Nami was still arguing that Luffy should have stepped in to stop Zoro from fighting Mihawk. Luffy stood his ground, explaining that while he would do anything to protect Zoro, he could never interfere with another man's ultimate dream. Nami found this hard to accept, believing that most people's dreams are just out of reach anyway. Meanwhile, the Vice Admiral is sharing a moment with Coby, discussing the boy's relationship with Luffy. The Admiral had spent years trying to steer his grandson toward a career in the Navy, but Luffy's heart was always set on piracy. He was determined to catch Luffy just to knock some sense into him. But Coby pointed out that after spending time with the Straw Hat Captain, it was clear that no amount of pressure would ever change his mind. Coby suggested that maybe it was time for the Admiral to let Luffy live the life he chose for himself. Reluctantly, the Admiral decided to call a full staff meeting to figure out their next course of action. At the same time, things were getting dangerous back at the Baratie as Arlong and his fishman crew arrived looking for a meal. The fishman pirates showed up at the restaurant and immediately started harassing the customers, physically removing people from their tables. Arlong acted like he owned the entire East Blue, demanding the best service for what he called a farewell meal, all while putting everyone in the restaurant on high alert with his presence. Arlong revealed he was specifically looking for a certain pirate in a straw hat who had something that belonged to him. Chef Zeph tried to play it cool, claiming he didn't know anyone like that, and offering Arlong a free meal just to get him to leave quietly. But Arlong wasn't interested in being bought off with food. Arlong threatened to start eating the customers if the Straw Hat Pirate didn't show up immediately. Nami realized that Arlong had tracked them to the Baratie solely to recover the map of the Grand Line. Luffy, Sanji, and Usopp quickly got into position, ready to fight and protect the innocent people from the Fishman's wrath. Nami tried to warn them that Arlong was the most lethal pirate in the East Blue, carrying the highest bounty seen in those waters. She was certain he would kill them all, but Luffy didn't seem bothered by the threat at all. Arlong continued to terrorize the dining room, boasting about how fishmen were naturally superior to humans in every possible way. While Arlong was ranting about his superiority, Luffy walked right up to him and commented on how incredibly ugly he was. It turns out that Arlong had only managed to track Luffy down because of Buggy the Clown, who had been inadvertently providing information about their whereabouts. Luffy had been calling Buggy by a silly nickname, unaware that the Fishman pirates had dismantled the clown, leaving only his head behind. Buggy had actually been eavesdropping on the Straw Hats' entire journey, because one of his detached ears had been stuck on Luffy's hat the whole time, leaking their secrets. Arlong made it clear that he was going to take the map and strip everyone in the restaurant of their valuables. Luffy was ready to throw down, but Chef Zeph actually fired a shot at Arlong first, sparking a full-blown battle. Sanji jumped into the fray, showing off some impressive combat moves, but even his skill wasn't quite enough to handle the raw power of the Fishman. Sanji was getting overpowered, so Luffy stepped in with a Gomu Gomu no pistol attack. Unfortunately, his punches didn't even seem to scratch Arlong. The Fishman just stood there and took the hits without flinching. Arlong eventually grabbed Luffy by the arms, announcing that he was going to make a brutal example out of the boy. Luffy was tossed outside of the Baratie, and the fight continued with even more intensity. Despite taking a beating, Luffy kept coming back for more, even landing a few solid blows of his own. However, Arlong exploited the rubber pirate's ultimate weakness by using the surrounding seawater to incapacitate him and knock him down again. Just as Arlong was about to finish Luffy off, Nami suddenly appeared and intervened. She told the Fishman that she already had the map in her possession. Then, the heartbreaking truth came out. Nami confessed that she had only joined the crew as a ruse to steal the Grand Line map for Arlong's organization. It turned out she had been a loyal member of Arlong's crew the entire time, leaving the Straw Hats in total shock. Before they sailed away, Arlong threw Luffy into the ocean, knowing full well that a devil fruit user would drown. It was a cold-blooded attempt to end the rubber pirate's life right there in the waves. Luffy was on the verge of drowning until Sanji dived in and pulled him back to safety. Once he was back on dry land, the weight of Nami's betrayal hit him hard. Meanwhile, the Vice Admiral issued a formal decree declaring the Straw Hat Pirates as high-priority criminals who would be hunted down and brought to justice at any cost. They were now officially fugitives from the law. Back at the Baratie, as the cleanup began, Zeph and Sanji were at it again, arguing loudly. Zeph kept telling him that he was wasting his talent and his youth by staying at the restaurant when he should be out on the open sea searching for the All Blue. Their shouting match was just another typical day for them. Luffy went to check on Zoro, who had finally regained consciousness, though he was still in a lot of pain. Luffy broke the news about Nami's departure, but Zoro simply looked at him and said he'd been a good captain so far. He then reaffirmed his commitment to the crew's mission. Zoro promised to stay by Luffy's side until they either found the One Piece or died in the attempt, solidified as the crew's first mate. Usopp showed up looking relieved to see Zoro awake, immediately starting to brag about how he was the one who actually scared off the Fishman pirates with his legendary bravery. Usopp was playing up his great captain persona, but Luffy had other priorities besides the Grand Line for the moment. He was determined to go after Nami and bring her back. At that point, Sanji decided to officially join the crew, realizing that every pirate ship needs a world-class chef to survive the journey ahead. In a touching moment, Sanji said his goodbyes to Zeph, showing genuine gratitude for everything the old man had done for him. With their new chef on board, they set sail to track down Nami. To find her, Luffy actually made off with Buggy the Clown's head, planning to use him as a sort of involuntary navigator for their search. They were on the move again, though Buggy was proving to be a massive annoyance to everyone on the ship. Zoro was so irritated that he almost threw the clown's head overboard, only stopping because they desperately needed him to find Nami. While Luffy wanted to believe in Nami, Zoro was convinced she had been working with Arlong all along. The crew was debating her true loyalties, but Luffy insisted on hearing the truth directly from her. We then start to see the reality of her past. As a young girl, Nami lived a peaceful life in a small village with her adoptive mother and her sister Nojiko, long before she became a thief. She used to be happy with her small family, but in the present day, she was living a life of deception among the fishmen on her home island. Arlong was demanding the map from her, taking us back to her childhood in Kokoyashi village where her passion for the ocean first began to develop. Young Nami spent her days dreaming of the sea and stealing books from the local library because her family was too poor to buy them. Her mother Belmere was always scolding her, trying to teach her that stealing was wrong because it hurt others. Nami, however, was bitter about their poverty and having to wear her sister's hand-me-down clothes. In a moment of anger, Nami yelled that Belmere wasn't even her real mother, which earned her a slap and sent her running from the house. Later, Belmere found her and shared the story of her time in the Marines, recalling a brutal battle against pirates where she had nearly lost all hope and her will to live. Belmere explained that she was starving and dying on a battlefield until she found the two girls, which gave her a new purpose to survive and raise them. This memory stayed with Nami, but in the present, Arlong was praising her for successfully retrieving the map, calling her a vital and valuable asset to his pirate crew. Arlong promised her a high-ranking position in his future empire once they took control of the entire East Blue. However, he had one more grim task for her to complete. He ordered her to go to Kokoyashi village, the very place she grew up, to collect the heavy taxes he imposed on the residents. Nami protested, saying the villagers hated her, but Arlong insisted that a human face was needed for the job. Meanwhile, the Navy arrived at the Baratie, with the Vice Admiral demanding information about Luffy. Chef Zeph, true to his word, played dumb and offered to cook the Admiral some steaks to distract him from the search. Zeph managed to charm the Vice Admiral with his cooking, giving the Straw Hats more time to move. Soon the rest of the crew arrived at a village that had clearly been ravaged by Arlong's influence. They realized they were in Kokoyashi, the village currently being squeezed for every penny by the Fishman's oppressive tax system. Nami was already in the village performing her grim duty when she crossed paths with her sister Nojiko, who was visibly upset by her return. The local leader Genzo, who had known Nami since she was a little girl, was also there. He used to be a mentor to her, always encouraging her to work hard and stay on the right path. Jinso had always tried to keep her from a life of crime, but Arlong's arrival had changed everything for the village. The Fishman had claimed the town as his own property, using his monstrous strength to flip houses and terrorize the people. It was during one of these violent raids that Genzo received the permanent scars he still bears today. Arlong wasn't satisfied with the amount of money the village had gathered, claiming they still owed him more. Later, Nami confronted Luffy once again, doubling down on her story that she was never truly part of his crew. She insisted that she had only been playing him for a fool from the very beginning to get what she wanted. Luffy stood his ground, demanding the map, while Nami declared she never wanted to see their faces again. Those were some harsh words, and it honestly felt like the journey might be over for the crew. But our boy Luffy knew in his gut that something was seriously off with Nami. He approached a local villager, claiming they were professional pirate hunters who desperately needed to speak with her. After the man pointed them in the right direction to find the orange-haired navigator, they headed straight for her home. However, Nojiko didn't exactly roll out the red carpet. She welcomed Luffy with a loaded gun pointed right at his head. Undeterred, the crew pressed for answers, insisting that Nami was one of their own and they weren't leaving without the truth. They tried to explain she was their friend, but Nojiko wasn't buying it, calling Nami a manipulative thief and doubting she could ever have real friends. That's when Sanji stepped in with a brilliant plan to win her over. He offered to whip up a gourmet dinner using whatever meager ingredients were lying around, promising a meal so delicious she'd have no choice but to spill the beans. Since a free 5-star meal sounded like a fantastic way to fill her stomach, She agreed to the trade for information about her sister. Speaking of eating, Vice Admiral Garp was currently busy devouring a massive stack of steaks elsewhere. Even while enjoying his feast, Garp was laser-focused on getting intel on Luffy's whereabouts because he knew something was being hidden. Garp suspected Zeph was playing him for a fool, but Zeph kept his cool, simply uncorking a bottle of fine wine to keep the Vice Admiral distracted and stalling for time. Meanwhile, over at Arlong Park, the atmosphere was completely different. The fishmen were throwing a massive celebration, cheering because their sinister plans were finally falling into place exactly as they expected. Nami eventually showed up, reporting a significant issue regarding Kokoashi Village and demanding to know if he intended to honor their secret agreement. Arlong, however, was in no mood for business talk during the party. He dismissively told her to just grab a drink and relax, completely ignoring her concerns while he enjoyed the festivities. Just as the party was heating up, a group of Marines led by the corrupt Captain Nezumi arrived on the scene. They were there to collect their dirty payoff from Arlong in exchange for keeping the Navy in the dark about his criminal activities. Nezumi wasn't satisfied, though. He complained that the bribe wasn't nearly enough for the risk he was taking. Nezumi argued that covering Arlong's tracks was getting harder by the day, so they took the negotiation to the private office. Back at Nojiko's place, the mood was much lighter as she absolutely fell in love with Sanji's cooking. She declared it the most incredible meal she'd ever tasted in her entire life, and was genuinely grateful for the hospitality. With the meal finished, the crew got back to the point. They needed the full story on Nami. Nojiko revealed their heartbreaking past, explaining how their mother, Bellamere, hid them in the basement when Arlong first terrorized the village. When the fishmen arrived, traditional weapons were useless against them, and Arlong demanded a brutal tribute of 100,000 berries per adult to spare their lives. Bellamere handed over every cent she had, which would have been enough to save herself. But the sharp-eyed Arlong noticed 3 plates on the dinner table and knew she was hiding someone. At that moment, the girls burst out of the basement to protect their mother, forcing her to reveal she had 2 daughters. The price immediately jumped by another 50,000 per child. Since she didn't have enough money to cover all 3 of them, Bellamere made the ultimate sacrifice, offering her own life so that her daughters could live. It was a tragic goodbye, and without a shred of mercy, Arlong executed the girl's mother right then and there. This act of cold-blooded cruelty changed their lives forever. The crew sat in stunned silence, unable to grasp why Nami would ever work for the monster who murdered her mother. Nojiko reflected on the past, trying to make sense of the tragedy. She explained to the group that Nami was just a helpless child when it happened, and despite everything, she knew Nami wasn't truly evil. Meanwhile, Arlong was finishing his business with the Marines, who had just doubled their protection fee. After the payment was made, Captain Nezumi made a backhanded comment about fishmen actually being quite intelligent, which immediately rubbed Arlong the wrong way and sparked some serious tension. Arlong was furious at the underlying prejudice humans held against his kind. Even though the powerful Jinbei was a warlord working for the government, Arlong made it clear he didn't represent that path. He served no one but himself. This display of dominance was so intimidating that it actually forced the Marine captain to hand back a significant portion of the cash they had just negotiated. After the Marine chief returned the money, Nami stepped up to finalize her legendary deal with Arlong. The price for the village's freedom was a staggering 100 million berries, and it looked like she had finally reached the goal. She planned to hand over the massive fortune at dawn, expecting Arlong to fulfill his end of their mysterious long-term agreement. While the details of their deal remained a mystery, over at the bar, Coby let slip some shocking information while drinking. He revealed to Helmeppo that Vice Admiral Garp was actually the biological grandfather of Monkey D. Luffy. This was a massive bombshell, but the local bartender was eavesdropping and realized this gossip about the Straw Hat Kid was valuable enough to sell. The barman claimed he saw the boy pass through and was ready to trade that intel for cash. Meanwhile, back at the restaurant, Zeph was still trying to play mind games with Garp to protect Luffy. He argued that meddling in family squabbles was a waste of time and led nowhere, reminding the Vice Admiral of the chaotic legacy left behind by Gold Roger himself. Zeph's stalling failed when the Marines arrived with the bartender's tip confirming Luffy's location. Garp set his course for the Konomi Islands, determined to hunt down his grandson despite the family connection. Back at Nojiko's, the rest of the crew was gearing up to take down Arlong and his gang of fishermen thugs once and for all. The Straw Hat crew was ready for war, though they had to literally gag Buggy the Clown just to get some silence while they worked. Nami, meanwhile, headed out to her mother's grave and started digging. And when her sister arrived, she was horrified, thinking Nami had finally lost her mind and was desecrating the burial site. Nojiko was shocked by Nami's actions until she realized that it wasn't a coffin being dug up, but a massive chest overflowing with money. Finally, Nami came clean about everything. She explained that as a child, she struck a desperate bargain with Arlong to work for him as his personal cartographer because of her incredible map-making skills. She proved her worth by drawing perfect maps, but her real goal was to buy back Kokuashi Village. The deal was set at 100 million berries to secure the freedom of her people. For years, she had been secretly hoarding every single coin she could find, suffering in silence just to reach that impossible sum and save her home. She had finally saved enough to buy their liberty, keeping the plan a secret all this time just to keep Nojiko safe. But Arlong was a snake. He had no intention of letting her go. He tipped off Captain Izumi and the Marines, sending them to the gravesite to seize the entire fortune under the guise of confiscating stolen pirate goods. Since Nami couldn't prove where the money came from, the Marines just hauled it away. In an instant, years of her life's work and the hope of her village were stolen by the very same pirate who caused her pain. To make matters worse, she knew exactly what Arlong was planning next, and it was going to be absolutely catastrophic for everyone. During a meeting with his crew, Arlong declared that today was the day they would unleash their rage upon the world, starting with the total destruction of the village. He ordered his men to slaughter every human in sight. Driven by pure rage and heartbreak, Nami began frantically stabbing at the Arlong tattoo on her arm, trying to tear it off in a fit of despair. Luffy stepped in and stopped her from hurting herself any further. In a moment of total vulnerability and crushing sadness, Nami finally looked at him and pleaded for help. Without hesitation, Luffy placed his most precious possession, his straw hat, on her head as a silent promise, telling her with absolute certainty that he was going to handle this. The situation turned into an all-out war as Arlong's forces swarmed the village. That tattoo Nami hated so much was actually a mark of her enslavement, a forced branding that meant she was property used only to draw maps for his global conquest. Now the Straw Hat crew was arriving to settle the score while the town lay in ruins. Seeing the destruction, the villagers finally understood the sacrifice Nami had made for them all these years, and were ready to take up arms to defend her. But Luffy stopped them in their tracks, declaring that this wasn't their fight to die in. He and his crew were taking over, determined to find a way to crush the supposedly bulletproof fisherman leader. Luffy was confident that once they found a gap in Arlong's defenses, he was going to deliver a world-class beatdown. Meanwhile, back at Marine HQ, they were questioning Captain Izumi's suspicious lack of action while a village was being demolished. Arlong had been doing whatever he wanted for years, and the higher-ups were finally starting to smell a rat. Izumi tried to save his own skin by shifting the blame onto Luffy, claiming the Straw Hat pirate was the one who destroyed the entire village. Coby wasn't about to let that lie stand, immediately speaking up to defend his friend, knowing Luffy would never commit such an atrocity. But it was the word of a corrupt captain against a lowly cadet. Luffy realized that just punching Arlong wasn't enough to stop him. He came up with a new strategy. If he couldn't break the man, he would destroy everything the man had built. They had to fight their way through waves of fishermen warriors to get inside. While Sanji and Zoro held the line, Nami led the way to the map room where she'd been held prisoner since she was 12 years old. She was finally going to reclaim her life and her maps, but Arlong wasn't about to let his star cartographer walk away that easily. Nami managed to grab the maps they needed to escape, but then Arlong loomed over them, wielding his massive Kiribachi sword. Outside, the chaos continued, as Usopp found himself being chased by a fishman who could literally spit whiskey like a high-powered machine gun. Sanji and Zoro, meanwhile, were turning the battle into a competition to see who could drop more enemies. As Zoro and Sanji tore through the fishman ranks, Arlong was busy monologuing about his dreams of global domination. He bragged about how Nami's maps were the key to his empire. He mockingly told Luffy that Nami had betrayed her own kind, but then admitted he never had any intention of honoring their deal to let her go free. Arlong tried to get into Luffy's head, questioning the future king of the pirates and asking if he planned to use Nami as a tool just like everyone else. He was convinced that all humans were the same. But Luffy wasn't interested in his philosophy. He was there for one reason, and he was about to show Arlong exactly what happens when you mess with his friends. Luffy shocked everyone by snapping Arlong's giant sword with his bare hands. He made it clear that Nami was a human being with her own dreams, not some object to be owned. He told Arlong he was just another arrogant bully who needed to be put in his place, and then he ordered Nami to get to safety while he settled the debt in blood. With Nami out of the way, the real showdown began. Outside, Usopp was still struggling against the whiskey-spitting fishmen, while Sanji and Zoro continued to clear the courtyard. Even though Zoro was far from 100% after his previous injuries, he fought with everything he had alongside Sanji to pave the way for their captain. Buggy the clown tried to act like he was going to help since his body parts were nearby, but the sneaky clown was just looking for an opening to save his own skin. He tricked the others just long enough to pull himself back together and beat a hasty retreat, claiming he had much more important things to attend to than a suicide mission. Usopp resorted to his classic play-dead strategy to gain an advantage. Once the fishman let his guard down, Usopp launched a specialized fire star. Since the enemy was literally soaked in flammable whiskey, he went up in flames instantly. It was a brilliant move, even if nobody was around to witness Usopp's moment of actual bravery. Sanji and Zoro found themselves facing off against Coby, a master of fisherman karate who was giving them a run for their money. Meanwhile, inside the tower, Luffy was finding that his devil fruit powers weren't an instant win against Arlong. Every time he managed to knock out the shark's teeth, Arlong would just grow a sharper pair back in seconds. He proved to be a formidable match for the fishman, mainly because his powerful gum-gum pistol shattered those razor-sharp teeth much faster than Arlong could ever manage to regrow them. That's when Luffy spotted a crucial weakness. It wasn't necessarily about a single finishing blow, but rather the sheer overwhelming speed that prevented Arlong from recovering properly during the heat of the intense battle. As the room began to crumble, Sanji followed Luffy's lead and started calling out his powerful kick attacks against Coby. The added intensity worked perfectly, and Sanji finally managed to take down the karate master with a series of devastating blows. Shortly after, Usopp arrived, having finally secured his own victory against a pirate. Nami returned to her friends, embracing them as Arlong Park literally began to collapse into a pile of rubble. The massive structure was falling apart, and everyone held their breath, wondering if Luffy was still inside. He was still locked in a life-or-death struggle with the highest bounty pirate in the East Blue. Luffy unleashed a relentless gatling of punches, followed by a massive gum-gum battle axe. The force of the kick was so powerful it finished the job of leveling Arlong Park and sent Arlong crashing through the final floors of the building. The reign of terror was officially over, buried under the remains of his own fortress. As the dust settled from the ruins of Arlong Park, Luffy emerged from the wreckage. He proudly announced to everyone that Nami was his navigator, his friend, and a permanent member of his crew. The villagers erupted in joy, celebrating the survival and strength of the rubberman captain who had just saved their lives. It was time for a massive victory feast, and Sanji went all out cooking for the entire village. He couldn't help but try to charm Nojiko while he worked, and naturally his petty rivalry with Zoro was still going strong. Meanwhile, Usopp was in his element, regaling anyone who would listen with his usual exaggerated tall tales of bravery. The party was cut short when Garp and the Marines finally arrived on the island. The Vice Admiral gave the order to arrest everyone for the destruction of the village, but Coby took a stand. He refused to follow the orders, arguing that it wasn't Luffy's crew that caused the harm, but Arlong's gang who were the real criminals. While Coby stood his ground, the other Marines didn't dare question Garp. The Vice Admiral stared down his grandson, offering him one final opportunity to give up his pirate dreams and walk away. But Luffy looked him right in the eye and told him he's been a pirate since day one, and he wasn't about to change for anyone. A fight broke out between the two, and it was clear why Garp was a legendary Vice Admiral. Luffy's attacks barely made a dent, and even his gum-gum rocket was easily brushed aside. Garp knocked him down with almost no effort, proving there was still a massive gap in power between the rookie pirate and the seasoned Marine veteran. Garp had Luffy by the throat, but Luffy just smiled. He told his grandfather that he could beat him as much as he wanted, but he was still going to the Grand Line to find the One Piece and become the king of the pirates. Luffy's laugh in that moment was so similar to Gold Roger's that it actually caught Garp off guard. Garp burst out laughing and let Luffy go. He ordered the Marines to stand down and focus on the actual pirates who terrorized the island. It turns out the whole confrontation was a final, albeit bizarre, test for Luffy. Even though Garp was letting them go, he warned them that they were officially on their own from now on. Luffy wasn't worried about being on his own because he had his crew by his side. The next morning, after a final farewell to Bellamir's grave and Nojiko, Coby approached Luffy as the Marines prepared to part ways. He showed Luffy his new wanted poster, something he had been dreaming of since he set sail, and the numbers on it were huge. Luffy showed off the poster to his friends with pride. He now had a bounty of 30 million berries, the highest ever recorded in the East Blue. They realized that with a target that big on their backs, staying in these waters would make them easy prey for bounty hunters. So the only choice left was to head for the Grand Line. News of the bounty spread fast. Makino, back in Luffy's hometown, was thrilled to see the poster, and Miss Kaya was happy to see Usopp's face featured in the background. Even Chef Zeph wasn't surprised at all. He knew all along that the bratty kid he met at the Baratie was destined to cause major waves in the world. Buggy the Clown was absolutely livid that Luffy's bounty had already surpassed his own, and Alvaro wasn't too happy about it either. Even Garp seemed a bit taken aback by how high his grandson's first bounty was set. As a result, he decided to put Coby and Helmeppo through some brutal training to ensure they were strong enough to face him one day. While the cadets were training, Mihawk tracked down Shanks and his crew to personally deliver the news. He showed Shanks the poster of the boy he had bet his arm on, proving that Luffy had finally become a real pirate. Shanks was overjoyed, seeing his protege finally chasing his dream, and they immediately started drinking to celebrate. Nami now had a memento from her village to carry with her on the ship. But the best gift was for the whole crew. A brand new sail for the Mary featuring their official Straw Hat Jolly Roger. Seeing their symbol flying high on the mast made Luffy even more excited for the journey that lay ahead. The Grand Line was calling their names, but before they officially crossed the threshold, they gathered around a barrel for a departure ritual. Each member of the crew placed a foot on the barrel and declared their ultimate goal to the world. It was a solemn moment of shared purpose before they entered the world's most dangerous sea. Sanji declared his search for the All Blue. Luffy vowed to become the king of the pirates. Zoro swore to be the greatest swordsman. Nami pledged to draw a map of the entire world. And Usopp promised to become a brave warrior of the sea. This powerful moment marked the epic conclusion to the first season of their journey. As a final teaser, we see the mysterious Captain Smoker burning Luffy's bounty poster with his cigar, signaling more danger ahead. Stay tuned for what's coming next, because the hunt for the One Piece is far from over. And that is exactly how the first chapter of this legendary tale came to a close.